welcome folks to another episode of Conversations with Annie and Kate. Hello, Annie.
Hey, Kate, how are you going?
And I think you're going to introduce our guest.
I am. It's always a pleasure when you get to have a conversation in one of these settings with a really good friend. And I guarantee I'll probably learn something new about our guest today that I didn't already know. So welcome Jamie Klingler to our podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it's good to have you. It's good to speak to you. It's been a little while since we last spoke. Jamie is the MD of Insight Global, which is a program of digital and live events to drive professional development across the creative sector. She is a digital comms professional and expert. She's worked for companies like Shortlist, which, if you haven't heard of it, British publishing company, awesome. She is the founder of lots and lots of different foodie events like International Burger Day. And I remember a few years ago, sitting there listening to Australian radio overnight and hearing her voice speaking to me about International Burger Day, which also just happens to be on her birthday as well. She is an activist, particularly with the Reclaim the Streets network, which I'm sure we'll talk about. She is a proud Philly woman, and of course, human to McNulty, who is currently on her lap right now. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us. It's great to catch up again. I know that we do a lot on Twitter, but to actually see your face is always a joy.
I know, and that's actually how we met, wasn't it? We met on Twitter about a good sort of 10 years ago.
We did, and then I was like, oh, the flip-flop lady, and we both have small dogs with male names that are female dogs, which we always laugh about.
And equally, there's another welcome to Maximus on Kate's lap right now.
Maximus.
Maximus is still one ear up, one ear down. We're still in the half. I kind of like it. I hope one of the ears stays floppy. I'm gonna say.
So what are we all drinking? I know it's morning for you, isn't it, Jane?
It is, and actually, one of my big changes in the past year is I quit drinking alcohol April 14th of last year, and it was kind of the change I made in my life that has kind of triggered all my other changes. So it's been really, really exciting, and I've stopped getting in my own way a bit, and I'm really looking forward to what the future brings. After a year of not drinking led to me taking up running, which led to me losing 85 pounds since October. So it's been quite a year, and becoming an activist in March. So yeah, life's changed a lot, but quite exciting.
That's a lot of changes. There's a lot of changes. Okay, it looks like you've got a glass of red going. Is that right?
I do. I have a Calvé Grand Reserve Bordeaux Superior.
Ooh, that sounds fancy. I've just got a good old-fashioned gin and tonic.
If I was drinking either of those things at 8:15 in the morning UK time, we'd all be a little more worried.
Yes.
It is evening in Australia, so thankfully we shouldn't be referred to our doctors right now. So Kate, do you want to kick off with a question?
I do. I wanted to ask you, what is your most inspiring book, film, music, any of those things, and why?
So I'm a big fan of sagas. Like, intergenerational sagas mean a lot to me when I read. And a book that was on my mother's shelf for a long time was Umbertina by Helen Baralini. And it's out of print, but it was a book that I read, I think it's the first time when I was in high school. And my mom passed away 3 years yesterday. And I read it again last year, and it's falling apart at the seams. And so I've got a rubber band about it because the pages have all basically come out. But it's the story of 3 generations. One is the grandmother who leaves Italy for the first time. One is her daughter who stays in America, and then the granddaughter that goes back to Italy, which is the whole motherland and the dream. But being an Italian-American young woman, I very much dreamed about going to Italy. And then I ended up spending quite a few summers in Camoli, and my 40th birthday, all of my friends came over to Camoli for that. And the amount of time I spent in Italy was quite special and quite meaningful, given how I grew up and what it meant to be at an Italian table. There's also this other book that ties in that's called The Lost Ravioli of Hoboken. And a granddaughter went back to Italy to retrace all the recipes and the actual ingredients her grandmother used in ravioli. So like stracciatella cheese became cream cheese in Philly. And she was my age. And actually we spent a Christmas making all of those ravioli. So those ties and what that means to be at a table and the mother-grandmother thing resonates quite strongly with me.
Lovely.
It is lovely. And it's one of your things, isn't it? You've been a massive, voracious reader for many years. And I know you run a book club as well, or you do run a book club, or are you part of a book club?
I run it.
But
what am I in that I don't run?
Yeah, books are just your thing, aren't they? You must, I can't remember how many you read a year. It must be hundreds.
I'm at about 150 on average a year, but I do like capsule reviews. So it's not about what the content or the plot is of the book. It's just about how it made me feel. And there's always a couple a year where I'm like, I threw it across the room, and I literally throw them across the room sometimes. But and it's not that they're bad books, but sometimes books don't fit where you're at in your life or what you're thinking. Sometimes they can be pretty poorly constructed. But yeah, mine is very much about what it makes me feel, what it makes me think about, what it reverts me back to, or what tangents those books take me on. But you're never lonely with a book. Like I'm perpetually early, but I've always got at least one book with me.
That's true. That's true. I've never seen you without a book, not in 10 years.
And now you can have books in your phone. I love it.
Yeah, I can't really do that. I have a Kindle, but I that type of reading doesn't get me there. I'm actually, a friend runs Calm, the app, and we talk a lot about flow and meditation because I'm really not good at it. But he talks about that my flow is when I'm deep into a book. And when I'm deep into a book and I can turn everything else off, that's where I'm the calmest and I can really, really dive in and not think about anything else. Whereas with other medium like film and plays and stuff, I can get into it, but I don't totally turn off everything else.
So here's my question for you, Jamie. If you could go back to your younger self and give you any piece of advice, and you can go back to any age, it can be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even yesterday, if that's what you want to do. But what word of advice would you give yourself?
I think I put a whole lot of pressure on the fact that I hadn't been in a long-term relationship for a long time. So when I was single, it was all like, oh my God, if I don't find that person, if I don't prove that I could get married, if I don't prove that I could be in a long-term relationship, that I've got staying power, that there was something missing. And then I was in a relationship for 9 years and it wasn't that big of a box to tick. Like, he was important to me and we had a great relationship, but like this idea that someone else completes you, whereas if anything, lockdown and learning to not be drinking and to sit with myself and to be okay with the number of hours that I was spending in pubs, just boredom drinking. Like, my biggest thing was learning to spend time with myself that I wasn't just reading, because I've always been good at spending lots and lots of time alone reading, but it was more this spending time cooking, and spending time going to the butcher's, spending time walking, like that I hadn't spent very much time at all in the last 20 years alone. And actually learning to sit with that and learning to be alone has been a really, really exciting discovery, because like I was always good with other people and I was always good performing and being in the room and running things and running 100 miles an hour, but the actual quiet time with myself. And when people said they like to spend time alone, I thought they were just kidding. Like, I didn't actually realize anybody liked to be alone. And now, like, a friend's just given me a writer's retreat for a couple of days. And this morning I just went running somewhere that I've never been before and was by a river and like exploring and just calm with it, and finding that ability to like my own company was a long time coming, but I'm pretty happy with it.
Awesome.
I hear you, but I went on a silent retreat a long time ago, and the
Oh my God,
first
that
day
gives me
I just
shivers.
sobbed.
I'm sorry, what did you literally just couldn't, how long were you there for?
3 days, but it was the longest 3 days of my life. But the first day, it was really confronting, and I ended up just sobbing. It was really cathartic, though.
Oh my God, I'm nowhere near that enlightened. I talk to my dog, I sing to my dog, I read to my dog. I'm sorry,
really hard
Michelle.
even at meals, you couldn't talk. You had to just gesture. It was really interesting, psychologically, you know, how much I relied on talking and being talked to. So I really hear what you're saying about being on your own.
So how long have you been in the UK for now, Jamie?
19 years this month.
And you moved over, did you move over with the view to, you know, sort of live there forever, or was it meant to just be a short stint?
No, it was meant to be a year. 9/11 had just happened. Our lease in our apartment was up. They offered me a year abroad, and it was for Corbis at the time, which was a Bill Gates company that was a photo library, to start up a part of the business there. And it was very much meant to be a year. And so I was calling it my paid for study abroad. Like I had never visited, I signed a contract having never visited London. And the first year was hell. Like, again, I was used to having lots of friends. I was used to being the organizer bee and not knowing anyone. And English people are not overly welcoming to Americans, especially loud, brashy Americans. So finding my tribe and finding those people that I wanted to spend time with was quite difficult.
And what was the reason why you decided to kind of stay and have stayed?
So softball at the time. So softball was my tribe. So I ended up being very, very ensconced in that for quite a few years. And it's kind of like expats go back after 3 years, or once you're there for 5 and you get indefinite leave, and then you're like, well, I might as well get the passport. And at that point, because I moved over when I was 22, so at that point it's getting you to like 28. And everyone I knew in America had at least 1 kid by then. And it was kind of like, oh God, I missed one boat, or I'm on another boat. And every time I went back, I liked that I was not always in Philly, and that I didn't have 2.5 kids. But I also, like, it's the whole, you know what it's like. It's the life of an expat. When you're home, you're like, oh my God, I miss home. And when you're home, you miss home. And like, I'm about to go back to Philly, and I'll be in Philly for 4 days, and I'll really miss McNulty, and I'll miss the control I have over my life in London. Whereas at home, when I see everybody, it's been so long, and I'm so excited to see everybody. But I don't fit in. Like, I've not spent my adult life in America. And so all of these Americanisms get highlighted and feel super American. And also, I don't know about you when you're back in England, but like, I revert to my 16-year-old self. I'm a brat. I want things done my way. Like, the way I sit within my family, because I haven't done it in so long, feels again like I'm a 16-year-old brat who wants my way. You know, like they don't see me really as an adult. I don't see me really as an adult when I'm there. Like, I think it gets muddier. Like, you're frozen in time from when you last spent a lot of time there.
Interesting. I must admit, it's been, the last time I went home, as you know, was not under, you know, most pleasant circumstances, going home to help out because Dad was going through chemo. I don't know. I don't think I was so overwhelmed with everything else that was going on. Nothing else mattered. And I know you've gone through it too. So you mentioned that it was 3 years since your mum's passing yesterday. And honestly, my heart goes out to you. I know how hard that is. And you went home as well, didn't you, to help out with the chemo as well?
Yeah, and part of going back on Monday is the 7 years prior, she was sick. And so I haven't been in Philadelphia without that.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna be
so going back and now having done all this stuff, but having done all this work on myself and going back and not be drinking to medicate myself while I'm there for chemo. And my mom had sarcoma for 6 years. And so I went back for 3 leaves of absences to sit through chemo to be there. And to go now and to be eating completely different, to not be drinking, like there's just a lot of factors of setting some boundaries. My grandmother's like, what do you mean you're not going to eat hoagies? Well, you'll at least eat grilled cheese. Like, and obviously I'll have some stuff, but also she was like, when did you become such a snob that you can't go camping? And it's all these people I went to high school with go to a certain amusement park where they camp with all their kids. And I'm like, Mom, I can go and visit and sit there for a couple of hours, but everyone will be drinking around a campfire all night. And that's not the boundaries that I need to set on this trip. Like, I need to be able to go visit, sit with people, but also like people that I haven't seen from high school. I'm not necessarily going to have anything in common with. Like, obviously some of my friends will be there and it'll be great to see them. But like, my best friend has 4 teenage boys. I do not need to camp with 4 teenage boys. I don't have children for a reason. Like, I don't need smelly boys in a tent.
No. I'm totally on your side with this one.
Can't imagine.
But my grandma was really giving me a hard time. And I have said to my friends that I'm going to see, I'm like, I need everybody to give me a bit more of a buffer. When I say I need to go to bed or when I say I'm leaving, it's not that I'm trying to be a dick about it. I just am setting different boundaries. And especially in London too, when I'm out and people are like, stay for one more. And I'm like, no, when I say I'm going, this is my new little world in fiefdom that I've decided how it runs. And this is what I have to do to keep my own head on and to not feel like Debbie Downer, to not feel like, oh my God, you're all repeating yourself and you're getting boring and I want to leave. If I leave earlier than that, then I have a really nice night. I'm happy to go home to McNuggets and it all works out. But those boundaries aren't natural for me. Like, I'm used to being the last one standing. I'm used to keep going and going and going. And so that's part of my kind of mapping it out in advance and being like, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with this. And it's easier in the States, I'm sure, because there's driving involved. So like in London, it's much harder to have an excuse of why you're leaving at 9 o'clock without saying you're just getting on my nerves. I want to go home.
I love the fact that so many of my friends are older now and all need to be in bed by 9 p.m. So you go and have 6 p.m. dinner and it's over by 8:30 and you can go home and read a book or something.
I'm gonna make an amazing senior citizen. Like, early bird specials. Like, I get up and run at 5. Early bird specials are my bag. Like.
So you've worked in digital publishing and digital kind of communications and media now pretty much your whole life. Talk to us a little bit about how that happened for you. Is it, was that something that you always wanted to work in as a kid? Was it accidental that you ended in this career?
So it was actually much more print communications. So Corbis was celebrity portraiture, but not like paparazzi, very much approved portraiture. So my original thing was about film and TV broadcasting. So I majored in film production. My first job was Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Dun dun. And then,
I like the dun dun. That's very good.
That was our chant on our Law and Order softball team before we batted. Everybody go dun dun. And then I was on the first season of that. I was in charge of the cast. And then the second series, that one of our producers, I went to the mothership, which is original Law and Order. And the second series, my assistant director was like, this is not where you're going to thrive. Like, there's too much going on in your brain for you to just be on set for the rest of your life. He's like, NBC wants you to come do publicity there. You should go do that. As I give the dog a treat. She doesn't bite me. And so I went to NBC to do entertainment publicity at 30 Rock. The building is actually the address of 30 Rockefeller Center. And it was the most boring summer of my life. Like, the way the hierarchy was in NBC, the woman that was above me spent 15 minutes teaching me how to put an address label on an envelope. That was fun. And I was told that I was so lucky because I didn't have to go through the page program because I was above a page. And it was this whole thing that you should stomp on the people under you because you're elevated above them, which goes against everything I am. And especially that I should talk down to young women or have young women get me coffee. Like, I don't drink coffee, but fuck that. No, like my role in my entire existence has been helping students that were younger than me, helping any girls that are beneath me, anybody that has questions. And actually through the, more through the weight loss than the not drinking part. But I know how hard it is to email somebody and be like, so how did you do this? Why does it work? What are you thinking about it? And those emails that come in, they're 15 minutes for me to answer, but they were probably 5 days for someone to say, I want to work on my fitness. I want to work on my weight. Like, is this okay? Is this going to work? How scary is this? Because it's one of those things that I never ever talked about my weight until I just started losing it. But it's been there for so long, and it was wrapped up in my mom and my mom's weight issues and my mom's body issues. And like my mom used to talk about how huge she was all the time. And I look back at pictures and she wasn't huge. She just had this view of herself. And so she spent so much time going to Weight Watchers meetings all the time. And then on Sunday, after she was weighed, eating all this cheese in front of us, and that strengthening of the thing about food equals love, or food equals comfort, or food equals this, that's kind of the biggest stuff that I've really been working on this year, to get to a point where, yeah, if I'm cooking for people, food can absolutely equal love when you're at my table. But when it's fuel for me to run and get through my day and do all this stuff, it doesn't always have to be this like huge feast. And it's not every meal needs to be like, there needs to just be balance, and finding that balance in all parts of my life has kind of been my theme of lockdown and of the pandemic.
So you are now at Insight Global. Talk to us a little bit about what that is and what you're doing there.
So Insight Global, Insight's all about professional development that's actually relevant. So much professional development, especially in PR and comms, is like, this is how you write a press release that you attach to an email. Nobody wants a press release that's in a PDF attached to an email. Like, what communicators have forgotten how to do is to communicate information that somebody wants to receive. And like, that's just been lost in the process of teaching people how to do it. Like the pandemic and the comms teams within this government, it's been the worst thing I've ever seen. You've got slides at these press conferences. The press conferences are late. They're eating into Strictly Come Dancing, which is pissing off half the nation. Then the slides don't fit the screen. They don't have a slide thingy. Great communication.
Move the slide.
Yeah, to move the slides forward. The information isn't clear. It's not what people need to hear. It's not what people need to know about their kids. There's no hierarchy of the information, and it's just it's not giving people what they need to get.
So nobody's actually thought about the act of communicating.
And they're paying these comms people so much money to not communicate. And so instead of that, with Insight, the stuff we're talking about is about becoming B Corp certified. It's about sustainability. It's about how to run an anti-racist company. So it's not about just don't have racist incidents within your staff. It's commit to the fact that you won't have casting that's not diverse, that you won't have hiring practices that aren't neurodiverse. It's about being progressive, but being ardently progressive and proud of it. It's about the way that you operate within your personal life and your company life, that what we're doing, we're proud of, and that we want to move forward, and that we're building comms people that help shape the world.
Which makes perfect sense. And I agree with you, having been in Australia for sort of most of the pandemic and then coming back to the UK for a little while. The moment when I guess he was probably like the chief medical officer or something, starts going, next slide, please. And it's just this huge curve graph with no idea what's on either axis. And
you can't
see
the indexes.
The line actually means, and you're going, nobody cares, dude. Just tell them whether or not they need to go home and stay home, or they're allowed to do other things. I mean, the communication of medical information is really hard to do anyway. But when you start to have 27 slides to explain it, you're doing it wrong.
And this is the thing, though, if you take that down to the way you talk to a room, And the way that you communicate what your point is to anybody that's listening, like a 4-year-old should be able to understand almost any presentation I give. Like anything I'm telling you to do, I know how to do myself. I can walk you through the steps and bring you along on that journey. And if you're missing that, you're kind of missing the point. And my company had been sidelined, to put it mildly. Creative Influence Alliance is my events company. And because of the pandemic, everything got canceled. And like, we're still waiting for that to come back. But the government also hasn't been honest about the fact that I can't run my events if no insurance purveyors are going to insure what happens against another variant. So like, we're in limbo. And the government just doesn't give the actual information you want to hear, but they'll tell you about like random stuff that we have no idea. They still haven't talked about the fact that it's airborne. Like they still, and this is the thing, like that science and scientists have become an anathema. Like I interviewed for Insight, I interviewed one of the chief epidemiologists for Public Health England, who I know through softball. And it was such an interesting conversation because she's been waiting her whole life for this, you know, like she's been trained and she knows so much. And like through the whole pandemic, I'm just like, she's the smartest woman. I'll just share everything she does. But she breaks down the numbers and explains why numbers from Italy were different than numbers from England, were different from numbers from Germany, so that you weren't comparing the same thing. So when you're looking at things and like, it's crazy that people like in regular conversation are like, oh, I've got Pfizer, I've got AstraZeneca, I've got this, that, the other thing, you know, like, but part of what's happening in the next week is I'm 5 days out from getting my second vaccine in the UK. I can fly home and get it immediately, but I don't know that they're going to be able to link that back up to my UK information. So I might end up just getting a third one when I get back, just to like get it on that passport, you know, but there's nothing in place that says once you're vaccinated that you don't have to quarantine. Like, the rules in the UK right now are that if you're in a restaurant and you're sat down, you don't need a mask on. But if you get up to go to the loo, you need a mask. Yeah. But you do, and you have to check in at all restaurants. But I got on a 2.5-hour train and there's no check-in at the train station. There's no check-in on the trains. Like
the consistency is lacking.
Yeah, the consistency. And all of us would be fired if this is how we played out our day jobs. And this is the thing, I am 100% for science. Like if you tell me there's a reason and you explain to me why I'm doing stuff, I'm all yours. I'll do whatever you tell me. But the lack of science and the lack of credibility just means that the mistrust in every part, and then the fake news and all that mistrust just grows and grows and grows. And I think the biggest place that we're doing a disservice to kids is their understanding of how to listen to media critically, how to read critically, how to digest things and understand what's going on.
Well, kids here get taught that. So the kids are probably better at it than the adults here.
Yeah, definitely a possibility. But for the first time this year, I've had an insight, throwing that one out there, through my work with Reclaim These Streets, about the inner workings and the behind the scenes stuff with politicians. And like, it's like West Wing on crack with no logic. Like there's not the decision-making in place that I thought there was. There's not the thoughtful consideration by lots of civil servants that I thought there was. It's literally like playing battleship with each other and you're just guessing where you're hitting bombs. Like it's so less creatively and strategically done than I hoped. I didn't realize it was an Oz curtain. I really thought that there was a lot more thinking and planning and looking out for us than I've seen.
Yes, it is always terrifying to be near the seat of power.
And so it was a bit more about Reclaim the Streets. So this was about a young woman who was attacked and raped and killed in London by a police officer. And we have a similar issue over here in Australia with domestic violence and violence against women. It's off the charts in terms of.
Well, the worldwide pandemic. I think it's in every country. And this is where it went so global, is Sarah Everard was walking home, and she had called her boyfriend and said, I'll be home. She was wearing a brightly covered jumper. She was on a well-lit road. So part of the reason that it caught like wildfire in terms of she was just walking home, and I've seen the stuff about Enough is Enough and some of the stuff in Melbourne and some of the marches. So basically I had put a tweet out the night that her remains were found and said that I was going to do a vigil. We were still in lockdown, and cops were going door to door and telling women the only way they could keep themselves safe was to stay indoors. And like, I'm 42 years old. I've just been locked down all year. What, I'm not supposed to get my groceries delivered. I'm not supposed to ever get a taxi. So the only way I can stay alive is if I lock myself in my flat by myself. Like, that's not acceptable. And so the anger, the rage, the grief, all of it combined, I sent a tweet about that my private WhatsApps were blowing up all week. It got like 500,000 impressions. So then I threaded one onto that saying I was going to do a vigil because of my events experience and my experience with women's mags. I could have gotten the publicity and stuff. And then other local women were like, oh, we're already doing one. Do you want to join forces? So this was Wednesday. The vigil was supposed to be on Saturday. And I was saying I went to the police and went to the councils, and the girls had already done both of those things, but two of them were counselors, like elected counselors. So we joined forces. Thursday morning, we split up duties. Like, I was going to get all the electric tea lights and the PA system and things like that. And then Thursday at like 2:30 in the afternoon, the police coming from the highest parts of Metropolitan Police said that they were going to shut it down, that we were not allowed to protest. We were not allowed to have a vigil because of COVID restrictions. By Thursday night, we agreed that we were going to sue the police for our human right to protest. We raised 37,000 pounds in the course of an hour to sue them, because you have to prove that you have enough money. And by Friday at 3:45 p.m., we were in high court, and I was one of the claimants against the Metropolitan Police saying we had the right to protest. The judge basically used two different rulings to come back and say we did have the right to protest, but the police had to take a proportional review of our right to protest versus our COVID restrictions and give us the parameters within which we could do that protest. While we sat on a Zoom call with Scotland Yard and with the Metropolitan Police, asking them, and we were like, if it's only 30 people allowed, just tell us what the rules are and we'll stick by the rules, but you have to tell us the rules. That's what the judge just said. We sat there, we're intelligent women, and we did hear what he just said. And they sent a press release out to the entire country saying that it was illegal for us to gather, and it would be an illegal gathering, and we would be arrested, fined 10,000 pounds apiece, and get arrested with Serious Crimes Act and prosecuted. And then that was also true for everyone up and down the country that was having satellite vigils. So we had a very, very upsetting night, and there were lots of tears. And I was joking that we were the Clapham Nine, because I knew, given profile and given how much media attention there was, we could raise the 90 grand for us. Like, we could get enough publicity and enough money for the 9 of us that we would be okay. But what we didn't have permission or even know their names or know all the women is for the other 30 women up and down the country. And like, that 10 grand, that could make you go bankrupt. You can lose custody of your children. Like, we did not feel that we had the power to make that decision for them, even though they would be making the decision to show up or not. But we just felt like that was not okay. So then we pivoted and we decided to raise 320,000 pounds rather than fine money go to the police, that money would go to women's and girls groups and fight violence against women and girls in that way. So we canceled the vigil. We said to them, people are still going to come. Are you going to indemnify us? They refused to do so. We raised 550,000 pounds for women's and girls groups, which we're very, very proud of. And came under fire for not going, because the world then saw that the cops manhandled women at the vigil the next night anyway. And it got really, really messy and really ugly. And they did not treat it with any care. And so every time that it felt like the press was going to go away and it was going to calm down, the police did something else that was awful. And like we sat for 10 hours and testified to the HMIC FRS committee for them to say that we were naive to think that we knew how to put on a vigil. Like totally disrespected us yet again, stomped on us yet again, tried to silence us yet again. So we're currently suing the police again and the Secretary of State to permanently make sure it's in law that there's an exemption for the right to protest. And so literally from March till now, Reclaim is like 35% of my life. Like it's so much time and effort and energy, and it's so important, but it's also not stepping on other women's toes who've been doing this work for years and years and learning the ins and outs. We've decided very much to make our mission about women in public spaces. So our mission is we aim to make Text Me When You Get Home obsolete through education of men, community action, and legislation. And the education of men part is really important because it's not about women having more self-defense classes. It's not about us protecting ourselves. Like that's not, we're not the ones responsible for this.
Well,
we're not the ones.
It's his problem.
Yeah. And so that's really where our focus is. And that's ruffled some feathers, you know, there's been some fisticuffs about it, but it's very much about women in public spaces. But 3 weeks after we launched all of this, a PCOS officer, Julia James, was killed by a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. And then Maria Jane Rawlings was killed by a 20-year-old in public. Like, and those women were not on the front pages at all. And there's so many women killed. There's been 41 women in London, or not in London, in the UK killed since Sarah Everard. And like, it's just exhausting. Like I've had to have some like counseling about hearing all of these women's stories and the pressure for where we were going to spend the money and the pressure about all of that. It's so much to take on, and it's so important. So it's balancing out how you absorb that and how you give people a place that they can talk, but that you're not empathetic enough that you're scared to ever go outside again. So it's been a real.
How are you managing that? How are you keeping your hope and your integrity and stuff without getting ground down and without losing hope?
It's really hard. It's very much that you can't talk about violence against women all day, every day, and then comfortably walk outside. So you need to like I've been doing this. There's all these women that worked in Calais and did all this refugee work. There's like yoga with them because the burnout level for activism is so high. And yeah, I spent a lot of time with the dog. There's 5 of us who are really doing Reclaim all the time, and everybody kind of bows in and bows out when they can take it mentally. And then I'm having anxiety and stress counseling.
It's such important work, though.
It's so much to shoulder when you feel like you're pissing up a wall a bit, because you don't see that you're changing things, even though you know how important it is, and you know how crucial it is for people's lives.
It's so important. It's so important. And I know that's just something that you know, you've learned from your mum. It was what she did too. So I know she'd be proud of you.
It's always lovely when you know your mum will be proud of you.
Yeah, my mom was a protester. My mom was always a protester, much more so than me. And I feel like I've come to this late in life, but I think she'd be over the moon with the changes and the investment I've made in myself over the last year.
So that's a really interesting place for us to come to, because we started out talking about your mum, and now you've talked about how you've almost taken on her legacy.
Very much so. And I posted a picture in the middle of the Reclaim stuff of my mom with my brother in a stroller protesting Rizzo and racism in Philadelphia. And that was before I was even born. And so my mom was regularly on the front lines of protest. And she protested when she was in her wheelchair dying of cancer for teachers and teachers' rights and teachers' unions. And she'd be pissed off about what they've done to teachers during the pandemic and how little support teachers have had. So we haven't always had the same cause, but she would have been very proud of what I've tried to do this year. And all of it hasn't been perfect. And but we're working towards a place where there's all women's voices at the table and what that looks like and what that feels like. Because especially like right now, two sisters, Biba and Nicole, were killed last year in a park in Harrow in London. And on August 3rd, we're working with their mother and Black Lives Matter to hold a candle and to bring lots of women together because they didn't get any front page coverage, because nobody talked about it, to bring all women to a park where I've never been, but we need to stand there and we need to say their names, and we need to say their names, and they need justice.
This is such marvelous work. I'm so impressed. And this is where our time is up. So thank you very much, Jamie. Thanks, Annie. Lovely to meet you, and lovely to
meet you too.
Bye, everyone. Leave us a nice review.
Thanks, folks. Lovely to see you, Jamie.
Mwah.